Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Yanina Dore, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Welcome to this special mini-series where we take a closer look at the people and organisations in the wine world who are championing diversity, equity and inclusion. So across these episodes, I'm going to be sitting down with inspiring voices from winemakers and educators to change makers across the industry, all doing meaningful work to shape a more inclusive future for wine. These conversations are designed to uplift, to challenge and to leave us all reflecting on how we can make positive changes in our own spaces, whether that's in the vineyard, the tasting room or the boardroom. While we may not be diving quite as deep into the usual wine geekery this time around, I promise you'll still walk away with plenty to think about, fresh perspectives and perhaps a few new producers to discover, all rooted in purpose. I hope each episode leaves you feeling just a little bit more inspired than when you started. Today's episode, I am joined by Julia Moore, the communications specialist from Bosman Family Vineyards, based in the beautiful Wellington region of South Africa. Now, Bosman was named Winery of the Year in the Platter's Wine Guide, Ethical Winery of the Year at the Drinks Business Green Awards, and their viticulturalist was named Best in South Africa by Tim Atkin. Now, with 26% worker ownership, their model of equity and empowerment is as impressive as the wines themselves. This episode, Julia talks about what true sustainability and inclusion looks like in practice, and we deep dive into the world of vine nurseries. So get ready to understand more about grafting vines, clonal selection, and vine health, and what actually happens in a vine nursery. So pour yourself a glass of wine and enjoy this episode, part 4 of our mini-series. Julia, I think it's really interesting that your career began in journalism, but now you've spent, I think, 8 years with Bosman. You have spent years with other wineries. So how do you think the way we talk about wine can actually invite people into the wine world? I always find that quite interesting, the storytelling part.
Well, Janina, thank you for asking that. I grew up in the winelands, and so it was sort of the industry. My family didn't work in the wine industry, but I grew up in this milieu, and then I studied journalism and I worked as a journalist. But the training as a journalist is very much how to simplify, how to communicate, how to get your point across. It's not about you; it's about the information that you give across. So when people ask me what I do, I don't ever say I'm a wine writer, because wine writers are traditionally, masters of wine who know a lot about wine. I have a lot of experience about wine, but I know a lot about writing. So I call myself a journalist in the wine industry. And I think that's an important distinction to make. As with anything, as a journalist, I hate wine speak, and I think that sort of really distances people. There's all people talking about fancy things and, funny little acronyms and whatever. Nobody knows what they're talking about, and it makes them feel very out. That's not what I want to do. I want to explain what we do in a very succinct and concise way, so that people get the message that we want them to get, not what we think we should show off with.
Well, I think that is such a valid point, and actually quite clearly you are in the right place, because the reason I'm so excited that we're talking is the Bosman family is all about community,
yes,
all about inclusivity, which we're going to talk all about it. So the community and the Bosman family, if I'm not wrong, have been farming together in the Bufflet of Wellington since 1810. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. In the UK, certainly, I'm sure it's the same in the US. It's like Stellenbosch, this is the famous region of South Africa. But Wellington is less known, but quite clearly has loads of history. So for everybody listening, can you help paint a picture of the region? So the geography, the climate, its terroir, and I guess how does that shape the wines that are made here?
Okay, so the Dutch settlers arrived in 1685, but the French Huguenots were granted land here by the Dutch in 1699. So it's a little bit later than Stellenbosch. but this at the time was the final frontier of the Cape Colony. So it's only half an hour drive to Stellenbosch, but this was the edge. And I mean, if you look on a map, it's still really at the tip of Southern Africa. So the mountains around us are called the Limitberge. Limit is limit. They were called the Limit Mountains because that was it, the final frontier. But our farm is on a mountain that's sort of just in front of the Limitberge. It's called Groenfontein. It's called Groenberg because that means green mountain, because it's green as opposed to these beautiful towering purple mountains that we are known for. Because it's green, because it's granite. The soil is decomposed granite, so the mountain is green, and so it's a very good place to grow wine. It has cold winters, slightly colder, just a little bit colder than everywhere else, and then it warms up very quickly in the springtime, so that budding and so on can grow. I grew up in the Paarl Valley, and that is in a valley, and the heat just sits there day and night. Whereas here, it's much more open, and so the nights are cooler. It's just a beautiful place to live and to grow wine. It's in the Boerland, which is Stellenbosch, Franschhoek, Paarl, and Wellington are all in that region. But it sort of was seen as the poor relation. If you drive along the main highway towards the hinterland, before you hit Paarl, you can turn right to Franschhoek, which is a great tourist capital, or left to Wellington, which is like this little forgotten village. And it's very quaint and beautiful. And they make beautiful wines here. But they're not very, when I got here 8 years ago, they weren't very show-offy, They didn't really think what they were doing was really great. They were just doing their thing here. And I was like, hang on a minute, there's a story here. This is a great place.
So for people to come, you mentioned that you grew up in Paarl, which is just, am I right? It's first of all, it's just south, but about 10 miles. There's not a big distance.
Yeah, it's sort of in a triangle, Wellington, Paarl, Stellenbosch. Yeah.
And about 40 miles from Cape Town.
Cape Town.
How long would it take to get from Cape Town to come to Wellington?
Just under an hour.
And so is it the mountain range that's surrounding? I know that this is an area with lots of kind of rolling hills and also valleys. So, lots of different options to plant different grapes. But is it those mountains that surround that really create as far as I know, much, much cooler nights, right?
Yes, but it's not sort of in a deep valley. So it's a wide valley. So the nights are cooler.
And are you still affected? Because you're a little bit more inland. Are you still affected by the Atlantic Benguela current?
No, not still. Really. We are a warm climate. Another little piece of history that I can tell you, which I find quite interesting, is that on this farm, we have dug up a lot of early Stone Age tools.
Okay, cool.
There are like lots of slopes on the foothills of the mountain, and we dug up these beautiful old hand axes, which are 1 million or so years old. We actually had a visit from a professor of archaeology last week, and he was telling us about them. And it just, to me, there's like lots of them. So it's just, to me, that gives you the sense of how fertile this place was. I mean, I've worked in the industry for 30 years. You occasionally see one or two here, but we've got piles and piles. So you can just imagine early Homo, I think they were Homo erectus or something. They weren't Homo sapiens. They were here. They were living here. They were, killing their buck and carving it up with their hand axes, digging holes and whatever. So it's really a very ancient place. And an ancient place of fertility and growth. So that's really nice to think about, that, our story is not 200 years old or 400 years old. It's actually 1 million years old.
There we go. For people who are really into history, as well as wine, as well as travel, this is a perfect place then, quite clearly, to come and visit. And also, the reason that you are sat here talking to me right now is because I want to talk to you about, oh my gosh, being named Ethical Company of the Year. You won numerous accolades for your wine, your community work. So tell me just a little bit about, I suppose, what does that mean to you personally? You're working with them very much, but also to the community that's been part of actually what sounds like the most beautiful journey.
Yes, to me, it is very significant because I've been writing about it for 8 years. And I understand the whole wine industry. I've been in it for 30 years. So to actually get it right enough to be awarded an award like that it means that we're doing something right. And to be able to be part of change, part of positive change and upliftment and empowerment is so exciting for me. The community, when we win awards and so on, when we won this award, I ran into the office and I just ran up and down through all the desks and I said, this is what we won, this is what we won, this is what we won. And they were like, what? And they didn't even realize we'd entered the competition. But then, gradually it sort of set in. But the whole ethos on the farm is one of progress. It's not one of let's try and win an award. It's not like, okay, if we do this now, then maybe we'll win an award. It's not like that at all. It's been like that for generations on this farm. Is we care for each other, we look after each other, we try and help each other. It's very much a community, to just live in it. And there's a lot of appreciation for each other, which just sort of permeates through the company. So an award like that is great for us in the office, but the people who are working, they understand that striving on a much bigger scale, and they just do it every day.
But you talk about those that are working. One of the most unique things about Bosman is its 26% worker ownership model.
Yes.
Can you take us back to that moment that you actually made that a reality? Like, what has shared ownership changed? I imagine the energy, the way the workers respond on the farm, how they live.
The Bosman family have always been a very progressive family. So Beatrice, we called ourselves Offered Generation 8 because Beatrice Bosman, who's our CEO now, he is the 8th generation on the farm. Him and his brothers and his sister farm this farm. But their dad, Wimyani, is the 7th generation, and he's still around. And, I found lots of evidence of care and upliftment and so on from generations back. So it wasn't something that suddenly somebody woke up and said, oh, hell, we better do something about this. It wasn't like a light bulb moment. It was a gradual thing with the government changing and with empowerment opportunities and whatever, the family was able to sort of grasp this opportunity and make it happen. It's very difficult to make it happen. And I've worked for a lot of wineries and I've written a lot of stories about transformation projects, and they're not as successful as this one. And I think the reason is because it's a family and it's a community. So where we are in the Boerflay, it's not a thoroughfare. It's not some place where people are on their way somewhere else. So that's why people have stayed here for generations. There's been employment and there's been generational skills handover, and people just carry on, living in the same house as their parents and having children and so on. So there's that sense of, how it's going to work. And then when we did the deal, that was fantastic and everybody understood it. And then things came, then we became accredited for fair trade at the same time. And that held us to a standard. So that was really helpful because it was an outside standard that was imposed upon us. And we were fulfilling it anyway, but it kept us going. And also what I really appreciate about fair trade is that they give training to the community, to the workers, in terms of how to run a committee, how to run a business, how to listen to people, how to structure things, so it's not so it becomes very much their own thing. So all the projects we have on the farm, like the creche and the clinic and the aftercare, they are run by the workers themselves. We don't sort of, well, the bosses don't sort of impose their ideas on it. And fair trade helps initiate that. And so that has been a great development thing, because then people buy into it because it's their creche.
That's fascinating. I thought I had no idea that it was the workers who are on the farm that are also running. And it's not just the creche that you have. You've got people, you're motivating people to go to college, that you're funding people. So that's interesting. You said that there's lots of projects. This is one of the really big ones, this educational path. So I mean, what is the vision behind this long-term investment in the children? You said about most people in the almost village don't leave, skills are passed down and that's that. Is it the idea of the bigger picture, giving people more opportunities?
Yes. So the creche was the first thing, that is something that everybody, that farmers realize they need to make their children school ready. When I got to the farm, the creche it's a wonderful creche. I mean, I would send my kids there. It's fantastic. It's really absolutely wonderful. But we realized that all the benefit that was happening in the creche was dissipated. By the time the children got to final year at school, our pass rate wasn't very good. Their results weren't very good. They didn't go on to tertiary education. So all this good stuff we were done down there wasn't making an impact up there, because they arrive at school in year 1 and they've got, they can count, they know their shapes, they can hold a pencil, they can do all these things. But then the teacher has got a whole lot of other, because it's a state school, right? So she's got a whole lot of other kids to deal with. So she shoves our empowered kids to one side and focuses on them. And then they eventually that just get dissipated. And also living in the community, there's still social evils that we have to overcome. So things fall by the wayside. Also, our farm is very big. So, people don't have access to Wi-Fi. So they're not computer literate. So they don't know what happens in the world out there. We're on a farm and we can drive to the village, but you don't have a car, you can't drive to the village. So when I started talking to the high school children about what do they want to be one day, they just think they have to be a farm worker and they don't really want to. But Beatrice is very keen. We've got a working document called Generation 9, and we don't want more farm workers. We want people that can use computers, that can operate very heavy machinery, that understand technology. We've got a guy that operates a drone. We need people in hospitality. We need people in marketing. We don't really need more workers. And to try and open that up for our children is hard work, and that's one of my passions is to do that. We do a lot of work in that space. It's not a quick fix, but we're getting there. We've got eight students at college now, which is, we started with 1 in 2020 and now we've got 8. And that's a huge thing. And you see them, the world opening up for them. Suddenly they see they go into PAL to study at the college, and suddenly there's all these things. And actually also anecdotally, when I ask them, is there anybody in your class that comes from a farm? Then they all say no. And, we have this lovely idea of farm being so romantic. I mean, look at it. It's absolutely beautiful. I'd love to live here. But it can be very isolating if you're not empowered, in terms of transport or Wi-Fi or, anything like that. And so to link these people to education, but then also opportunity is great.
Can I ask you just to clarify something, which is that many people listening, you talk about these people on the farm, people working on the farm, but literally we're talking, there is, I don't know how many people living on this farm as a community. This is where they live. So how many people are here?
So we have 150 houses.
Yeah.
And 450 workers.
Yeah.
So, and if you take their children and grandparents and whatever, it's about a community of 3,000. So it's very big.
That's on the farm.
But you mustn't think of this huge compound of people, because these farms were originally laid out in 1699. So they were small and they were self-sufficient farms. So you get a Cape Dutch house, and then you get workers' cottages, and then you'd have a vineyard, and you'd have apricots, and you'd have wheat and whatever, and your little cellar, and that would be yours. So we now actually own 11 of those original farms. So we've bought up all the farms around us. So each little original farm has a cluster of houses on it. So there's like 6 to 10 houses on each little cluster. So they live in a very small community within our community, within the Wellington community. So that's how it looks.
Honestly, that's crazy to kind of just understand a different way of life. So hopefully that's been transmitted to people listening. So I've got a bottle of Generation 8 Chardonnay. This is the 2024. I feel like it's wine time. You were saying that this was one of the wines that is part of almost the funding for the creche and some of the other projects. So how does that work? Whilst I take a little sip.
Well, let me show you the bottle. So this is what you would see in Sainsbury's, and you can see there's a fair trade sticker on it. So the way fair trade works is that there's a premium paid. So there's like, I don't know if it's 5 pence or 10 pence or something, but every bottle that is sold, then all those little premiums go back to the workers. So the workers get this money, and then they have to spend it in uplift and sort of account for it to fair trade. So it doesn't come through the farm's books. It's not something that, we get the money and then we say, okay, well, we'll give you this or we'll give you that. They have the money. they earned it because they made this wine, they grew this wine, they planted the vines, they did everything. So they get the money, and then they have to run the creche or whatever. And then they have to decide, okay, should we pay for karate lessons, or should we pay for dancing lessons, or what are we going to pay for? And so the label itself that you see in the UK, it's a beautiful label, and it's got a whole lot of things on it. There's the mountains in the background of Wellington, what it looks like, the vineyards, the indigenous plant life that we conserve, and then the houses. So it's all about where we live and where this wine comes from. And if you buy it, then you are supporting people's empowerment and communities' empowerment. And your seed lands on fertile ground because there are the structures and the understanding and the ability to make something work. Our creche is fabulous. It's so well run. The kids get 2 meals a day, 2 snacks. They have all their books, and the teachers get constant training. They actually do dance lessons and karate lessons. They do all those things. So, because we have the structure in place, we can actually put all that money to good use to make
incredible
and a lasting effect on the community.
Gosh, well, listen, everybody listening, I know this is not just in the UK, this is in the US as well. I'm looking though, this is available in Sainsbury's, and with a Nectar card, it's £8.25, which is an absolute bargain, £9 if not. I'm actually shocked. I find Chardonnays typically, especially if they've had some oak at the lower end, often very clumsy. This is so bright. It's almost beautifully honeyed stone fruits. And instead of it seeming like butter or really kind of even confected, it's just got this really soft, creamy texture. This is an absolute delight. This may be the go-to wine for white wine under £10. This is a cracker, and it's guilt-free drinking, knowing that we are giving younger generations the next step up. This is amazing. So this wine tastes delicious, has a really beautiful story. It's amazing that all of the proceeds get to go towards the workers here. You've also had Tim Atkin name your viticulturalist the best in South Africa.
Yes.
There's so many awards. This is brilliant. I don't think we're ever going to cover all the amazing things you're being recognized for or the projects you're doing. But if you can talk to me maybe about that whilst I'm sipping away on this lovely Generation 8 Chardonnay.
Let me just start. So what makes this farm unusual is that we are a vine nursery as well. So most wine farms just grow grapes. So I don't know if your listeners know, but every single vine is grafted onto phylloxera-resistant rootstock. So you can't just, like this vine behind you can't just cut a cutting and stick it in the ground because it will get attacked by phylloxera. That's what happened in the 1860s, where all the vineyards of the world were wiped out. So since then, we graft vines. So most wine farmers would then buy grafted vines from a nursery. But we are a nursery and we grow wine. So we also have a plant improvement unit, which is really the sort of the beginnings of the wine industries, in the sense that we start from tissue culture and propagate vines. So we graft 10 million vines a year. So that's a lot, 10 million.
Wow.
So we graft a third of what the country needs in terms of, so there are other vine nurseries as well. So to do that, the whole vine propagation process takes place during winter. And that's another thing which makes us so sustainable, is because most wine farms need a lot of labor in the harvest time. So in South Africa, that's sort of January, February, March. And then the rest of the year, they don't need that many. So they make use of contract workers. So they've got a few workers on the farm, permanent ones, and then they make use of contract workers. Now, these contract workers, one week they're picking lemons, the next week they're picking grapes, the next week they're picking strawberries. So they don't have any affinity or knowledge. They just do what they're told and then move on to the next and get. So it's piecework. Whereas here, our community is employed year round because of our vine nursery. So we don't have to employ huge amounts of contract workers because the people here, we've got a lot of people here. So we can keep them busy year round, and we can keep the husband and the wife employed. You know, that we've got the grandparents and the parents and the children. So there's a lot of, and then those skills are also passed down. So we've got a very skilled workforce. So not only are they not contract workers, but they grew up on the farm with their parents doing the thing, whether it's pruning or cutting grapes or whatever. I mean, you should see in harvest time, it's so exciting when you walk into the vineyards, and then because everybody gets paid the same wage, but then you get paid a bonus for if you pick more. So these people that, you go out on the tractor early in the morning, that we start 6:30. 6:30, all the workers come together and they say a little prayer, and then off they go. And then they go this vineyard, that vineyard, the next vineyard. And then they jump off with their baskets and they run and they literally pick. And I mean, I'm just like so ham-handed, I can't do any of that. But they're just so fast. And you see them at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're still going so fast. So they're incredible. So we did a sum once to try and figure out if we should, how many, if we could replace them with machines, and they're irreplaceable. So that sort of inherited knowledge is something that's really great. And also having the vine nursery, obviously our grapes are planted from vines that we've propagated. So we've been with that vine since cell level. So the provenance and the authenticity of what you're getting is really something unique.
Can you just touch on the vine nursery? Because even for me, when you say propagate, I understand, and you're cloning either rootstocks or you're able to. I have a gist, but I feel like myself, many listeners are unfamiliar with what it entails. You said about propagating typically in the winter. What are you actually doing? What is the main?
So they started now. So they finish. They sort of work up until Easter on the harvest, and then everybody goes on holiday for a week or two. Then they come back and they start the whole propagation. So what we have is we have fields with rootstock. So this is a vitis species, but it's not Vitis vinifera. So it's disease, phylloxera resistant. So they grow, but they just left to grow. They're not trellised like a vine. So they grow in furrows. So they're planted on ridges, and then they grow in furrows. And these canes of long vines go up to like 3 meters. Long canes, and they're all sort of tangled up and whatever. So then they go and harvest those, and they cut it right off at the nub of the vine. They cut all these things off, and then the workers. It's really quite nice because it's an inside job. You can sit inside when it's freezing cold. You don't have to be in the vineyards anymore. So they all especially the women. It's mostly the women that do it. Then they have a ruler, like it's 30 centimeters, and then they cut lengths of the rootstock at 30 centimeters. And then they have to cut out the eyes so that they don't re-sprout. And they have to leave an eye at the bottom so that will become the root.
Wow.
So then they cut that up. That's the whole month of May. They spend cutting rootstock. And then they are put into a cool room. And then they go and cut from the mother blocks. They will cut Chenin, Chardonnay, Shiraz, whatever it is. They will cut the scion. The scion is short little stick, so that it'll go on top. So if that's the rootstock, then they will graft it onto there, and they'll sort of graft it in a V. They'll cut the bottom and they'll cut the top, so it sort of goes into a groove there. Then they'll staple it together. So obviously there's lots of clones of Chenin, there's lots of clones of Chardonnay, so there's a whole lot of different combinations. So that's why there's 350 combinations. So they spend May doing the rootstock, June doing the scion stock, and then in July they graft them together. So in July and August, and it's a logistical nightmare. I have no idea how they do it, because a cutting looks like a cutting, and you're supposed to know that we're grafting Richter onto Chenin 168, and we're grafting Ruggieri onto Chardonnay 259, and they all look the same, and they can't get mixed up, and they are all grafted to order. So the previous year, the farmer, wherever he was, he will put in an order, and he'll say, I want this on this. And we will give him advice, because has he got sandy soil? Has he got clay? Is there lots of rain? Is it cold? Whatever. And the rootstock they will determine that. And then obviously the clone will be determined by their terroir as well. And then we will graft it for them, and it'll take a whole year. So we're grafting in July and August, and then as soon as the springtime starts, as soon as it starts warming up, we plant them out into fields, and they're planted very close together, and it's like a holding pen. It's like an incubator. So we plant them all out, and then they start sprouting, and they only have a 60% take percentage. So a lot we have to do that because not every graft takes. And so then we can only sell the ones that have taken. So we've got to plant a lot or graft a lot more than we actually sell. And then they then sprout, and then they stay in the ground until now. And now they're being ripped up. We've got a special machine that sort of rips them up and rolls them into bundles. And then the farmer will come along and he'll buy his bundles. He's buying the Chenin, and this one's buying the Chardonnay, and that's how it works. So it's a whole long process.
My. I find that fascinating. I didn't even understand the monthly schedule of grafting a specific clone of certain vine onto a very specific rootstock. And in general, you said there's 350 different combinations available of different rootstocks and different clones of grapes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are you finding that by doing this, that there are certain particular clones or rootstocks that are just outperforming others that seem to be very, very popular, that's, for this kind of current climate that people are leaning towards? Or is it so very individual per winemaker, based on the wine they want to make, based on their soil and their microclimate?
Okay, so a farmer should replace 4% of his vineyards every year in South Africa. That's how it works. A vineyard has a lifespan, expected lifespan. And also the trends change. So, now everybody's drinking Chenin. Last year, they were all drinking Sauvignon Blanc. So, there's change. So things change. So we have to take that into account. But what we're doing at the moment is we've got this huge research project where we are taking all the clones that we have. So say Chenin, we've planted out 7 vines of each one, every single varietal, everything that we have. And then we're assessing them for the health and the heat tolerance and disease resistance. So something like a loose bunch of grapes means it's more disease resistant because the air can flow between the bunches. So there's and look at the yield. We're looking at obviously the quality of the wine that's made from them, the ability to survive drought, the ability to survive disease, and so on. And so we're doing this huge research project so that we can give very, very good information to our farmers that come to us, so that they can plant it, so that their carbon footprint is less. So in other words, to get the same result, they can plant a smaller vineyard, or they can plant the same size vineyard and get a higher yield. That's what we're looking at, to be able to give the farmer that kind of information so that he can make good decisions that take climate change into consideration and reduce his carbon footprint. So obviously, if it's disease resistant, he doesn't have to spray so much. So there's no harmful pesticides. There's also no tractors going into the vineyards, which cause erosion. The wear and tear on the tires, the diesel, all that kind of thing is minimized if we are able to give our consumers really good information about the most sustainable varieties to plant.
So that's so fascinating. Such food for thought. And okay, I feel like you've just explained, it makes logical sense why you were named Viticulturalist of the Year in South Africa.
Yes.
You have a massive advantage by really being able to get so deep into your own research and having 100% control of the vines. Fascinating. Well, for people listening, they may be like, what? This is amazing. You're also named Winery of the Year in the Platter Guide. My gosh, major recognition. So that's Winery of the Year. Do you think that there is some things you're doing inside the winery as well that helped with the recognition? Or do you think this is the focus of the incredible vines, the quality of the fruit coming from the vineyards and all of the community projects?
Yeah, well, you see, we always see it as threefold. It doesn't help if we have a great community and poor wines. It doesn't help if we're looking after the environment, we're not able to produce excellent wines. I mean, the point of this agribusiness is wine. So we want to produce the best wine possible. And so we don't want to do it at the expense of the community environment. We do it but then what we want you to taste in the wines is the excellence that is happening on the farm on all levels. So, I mean, we've got 3 pillars on which we build our business: heritage, sustainability, and innovation. Those 3 are used, they go round and round in a circle. A family can't survive for 8 generations on one farm if they don't do something, if they're not sustainable. So they have to keep being innovative to be sustainable. So there's this sort of merry-go-round of those 3 things. that we're constantly doing. But excellent wines is always where we're aiming for. So our winemaker, Corlia Fourie, she's been here since the beginning, since 2006. So, I mean, she's very well known for her wines. So we make wines on all levels, and we do things that is innovative, Cinsault was the workhorse grape in South Africa. Everybody was dry red. That's what Cinsault was. All the cheap red wines are made out of Cinsault. And Corlia said, well, why don't we try and make a really excellent wine out of Cinsault? So we did. And, that's really, so we get 5 stars, we get an award or whatever for something that nobody expected us to do. So, or nobody expected anybody to do. We've got old vine wines, which we try to keep it always interesting. And then we've got our climate change wines. So besides what I told you now about our clones, we also, what the advice we give to our farmers, we're also looking at Southern Mediterranean varietals, different varietals that are heat tolerant and drought resistant. So our Nero d'Avola is like we produce the only Nero d'Avola in South Africa. That's something really innovative, but it's also really excellent. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh, there's so much to try. Well, you've pushed me. Go on then, twisting my arm. Let me try this bottle of Old Vine Chenin Blanc, which is only the 3rd oldest Chenin Blanc vines in South Africa, right?
Mm.
Amazing. Okay, I'm pouring this wine. I'm very excited. This is called Optenhorst. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Very good, yes.
Okay. Optenhorst Chenin Blanc 2023. Oh my gosh, talk to me. Do you have information about the origins of this block? Do you know who planted it? I mean, when was it? How old is it? Tell me everything.
So it was planted in 1952, and the Bosmans didn't actually own that little farm. It's called Optenhorst because the whole farm is called Optenhorst.
Mm-hmm.
And we acquired that later. But it was planted up there. And in 2006, when Corlia and Petrus started making wine, that vineyard was due to get ripped out because it was a very low-yielding vineyard and it was up there. And then Corlia had a look at them and she said to Petrus, why don't we just make a single vineyard wine? See, because up until then, all our grapes were delivered to the cooperative in the village. So all the Chenin would be harvested at the same time and just banged into a huge tank, and nobody would know which one was good and which one was bad. So the Optenhorst had never been vinified on its own. So then in 2007, we did that. We vinified it on its own and using the natural yeast found in the vineyard. And Corlia and Petrus were just astounded. They were just like, yay, this is a real winner. And that was before old vines became a thing. Nobody was talking about old vines at the time. That was something that only was introduced in 2016 by Rissa Creer. Up until then, nobody thought about that. So they were really pioneers in old vine wines as well. So it's the 3rd oldest vineyard in South Africa. As I said earlier, farmers are supposed to take out their vineyards regularly. You're supposed to keep regenerating your vineyards so that every 20 years you've replaced all your vineyards, 25 years. So yeah, this one skipped, but it's a wonderful vineyard. It's a Massal selection. So we can't actually pinpoint the clone exactly because what farmers did in those days is they would then walk through their vineyards after harvest and they would mark with paint their best performing vines. And then they would just take cuttings from that vine and then they would propagate it. So it's probably not all the same clone or the same rootstock. It's just who it is. And it's been there for a long time.
What do you feel about old vines? For you, how do you think? Many people, we know old vines typically gives more concentration because the yields are so low yielding. But for you, do you feel that there's more that an old vine can offer?
Well, I'm a storyteller, so I just love the story of a vineyard. It's something that, it really, and the wine itself expresses that story. That we call her the Grande Dame. She's like this beautiful grand lady that's been there forever, just quietly sitting on top. Optenhorst means on the ridge, so it's sort of on the ridge. So it's the wind naturally restricts the yield, and it's been doing its thing. And actually, the name of the vineyard. So all the community calls vineyards. They're not called that numbers here. They're all called names. Then there's a reason for their name. This vineyard is called Gesame le Cave. And Gesame le Cave actually means common pasture. And if you are standing on the vineyard, it is in the way of walking over the mountains. There's a pass that goes over the mountains that would have been traditionally used by those ancient people using the hand axes and the first peoples here, like the Khoisan, and the settlers that came here and had to trek over the mountains with their cattle. So you can imagine all the sheep and all the cattle and all the humans that would have gone over there. And at some point, the government would have said, okay, this piece of land is for everybody. You know, it have to be common pasture, you know, like a common in England. You know, it has to be a place where you can graze your sheep on your way somewhere else. So I just love that idea of this vineyard if you think of all that's gone there, all the stuff that's gone into that soil, that's what makes it so rich, and that's what tells the story of it. It's just so multidimensional. But I mean, not every old vine gives good wines, you know. It's not a given. But this one does.
Well, this one does. I can completely confirm. This is an absolutely beautiful Chenin Blanc. Again, this is just for anybody listening. I've looked in the UK. They have a 2021 and 2022 vintage. I'm assuming you must have just released the 2023.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so preview everyone, but it will be coming. But to give you an idea, this is about £28 a bottle. So big jump from the Chardonnay that's available in Sainsbury's, which actually honestly knocks it out of the park at the price point. Seriously try it. But this is such a stunningly beautiful wine just to sit down with. I think I'd actually really, really like to decant this wine, open it up. It's got this really elegant, I want to say it's like a Manuka honey because it's a much more savory. It's not like just this sweetness of honey. It's this savory, almost minerally, and I don't want to go smoky, but maybe flint. It's all these little suggestions. Beautiful bit of quince. And then,
quince, yes.
But the ripeness is there. But on the palate, it's so mouth-filling. I get like this absolutely pure, almost like pineapple juice. And then like I need to try it again one more time. It's almost like nougat or like a touch of burnt sugar,
yes.
but it's really different. Oh, that'll do. Yes, we'll take it. Yes. I think, somewhere between praline and nougat, but really the fruit is so front row and center. Gorgeous acidity, but it's this texture, like it doesn't feel, well, actually it kind of does. Hang on, I can't even decide how full-bodied it is because there's something that is just so bright and elegant with it. This is everybody, this Chenin Blanc can be some of the most beautiful wine in the world. It deserves so much more attention.
Yes.
Move aside, Chardonnay, you know, you've had some time. The Chenin Blanc, this is, well, how exciting for me to be able to try a wine from the third oldest Chenin Blanc vines. And these are bush vines as well, aren't they?
Yes, they're bush vines. And as I said, there's a Marcel selection. And then we harvest the grapes. So we first harvest what we call a pied de cuve. So a small amount, like you would do if you're making sourdough bread. You've got your starter. So we take that into the cellar and get that going. And once that is going nicely, then we add all the rest. And so it's just spontaneous fermentation, natural fermentation with the yeast that's found in the vineyards. And the winemakers always say when it's busy fermenting, the whole cellar is full of this sort of savory honey aroma. So it's really something special. I think something to note about all our wines is that our winemakers are all female, not only Corlia, but we've got 3. We don't tend to make big, bold wines. We tend to make intense, sensitive, intelligent wines, you know, that ask you to pause and think about them. They don't just hit you between the eyes. That's not the point.
Oh, that is exactly what it is, because the intensity of fruit is there, but the structure and the mouthfeel is so much more delicate.
Yes.
And something to really ponder on. It's beautiful. So I feel like you've touched on it a little bit more, but I want everyone to know, like, the importance of farming regeneratively. You have these super old vines. You're working with community that have been around for generations. For you, what does that actually mean in practice? The word, regenerative viticulture. It's something that I'm really passionate about sharing. For you, What does it mean on your farm? And I guess, how is it shaping right now the long-term decisions?
Okay, so, sometimes we talk about saving the planet. The planet is going nowhere. It's not going to sink into a black hole. It's us that's going to go. So we need to think about how to be sustainable. And that's such a cliched word these days. But how can we be here around for another 8 generations? It's so obvious to me when I work on this farm that, there's so much pressure to keep the ship afloat, because we've got 8 generations behind us. We need to make sure we can have 8 generations before us. So whatever we do, we don't do with a quick fix. It's not about how can we make a quick buck here. We have to think big, and we have to think ahead. And it's not only about our little family, it's about the community as well. Because that is, and of course, we've been farming on this mountain for 200 years, and we have to, so everything has to work together. So there's an understanding of that. It's not, at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock when it's home time, we don't just go off somewhere else. We're still here, we're still here year after year. So we have to look at that. And so we've done quite a lot of work in the vineyards, looking at how to farm regeneratively. So, for instance, we brew our own compost tea. So instead of using chemical fertilizers, which are chemicals, and that need a lot of water to go into the ground and then don't regenerate the soil at all. So you have to keep adding more and more and more. And the soil just goes dead. It just becomes like this dead medium which vines can grow in. So we make our own compost tea, which we've got like it's a brewer. It's like a kettle where we put in a tea bag. So it's a pack like us of which is like our starter, which is devised by a company that produces this thing specifically according to our needs. And then we brew this tea. It's got an element in it that heats the water up, and then an aerator, and it brews this thing. And then we decant it into a tank, and then we go and add it to the drip irrigation that goes through the vineyards. So we've been doing that for several years now, and the carbon content of the soil has improved by 220% at our last measuring. So it's really very heartwarming to know that we've got healthy soil. And so, we believe healthy soils make healthy grapes, or grow healthy vines, which produce healthy grapes, and therefore produce something in the cellar which is clean, unadulterated, and expresses where it comes from, rather than, a sum of a whole lot of chemicals that was added to it. This is what we're producing. So it's good to know that we're producing something authentic, but also it's regenerating what we're doing. So we have sheep that eat the weeds in between the vineyards and obviously break up the soil, and their waste also fertilizes the soil. And we can't have them in harvest because they eat the grapes. They're really naughty. So they can only have them in winter. And then we have eco corridors between our vineyards where we allow the natural fauna and flora to thrive. So the bees and the birds and the insects and whatever can. We introduce good bugs to eat the bad bugs. So that's what we do. Yeah. And also remembering, we all live here. We all live here on the farm. We breathe on the farm. So we don't want our community to breathe in harmful pesticides. We don't want them to be exposed to things like that. So the onus is really on us to look after ourselves and be responsible for what we do. Yeah.
Do you know, I in my head, I'm thinking of all these extra questions to ask you, and I realize we're going to run out of time. So I guess you personally, you work across the whole business, from the nursery to the cellar. You've built this really inclusive culture from within, something you should be really, really proud of. And I'm so pleased to be sharing this with people that maybe don't realize all the wonderful efforts that Bosman is doing. But looking outward, what do you think the global wine industry still needs to do better when it comes to equity and representation? Big question, though.
Yeah, it is a big question.
What's one thing?
I think on this farm, when I started here, there's a sense of humility of like, we're all in this together, rather than a top-down structure. And we rely on people over generations to pass down information between each other. And, Corlia says how there's this inherited knowledge that is respected. When you walk around on this farm, from when I first got here, People look you in the eye. People say, can I help you? People care about me, just like I care about them. But there's a standard here that it's just in the culture of how we do things. And it's happened over centuries and generations. We hold ourselves to that standard. And for me, coming in here, it was just mind-blowing to sort of experience that and to be allowed to be in it. So I think we have to get underneath and push up, whether it's in the environment or in the community or whatever. We have to actually get in there and say, how can we do this? And then work upwards. And, we're not foolproof. It's not fail safe. It's not, it's always a work in progress, but there's a momentum here, which is really exciting. And I think the more people who understand it and the more people who do it, the better we will feel about what we consume. We will be much more mindful and much more appreciative of what we do. We don't just glug back wine. We think about this beautiful wine and all the time and effort that's gone into it. And then it'll just be much more enjoyable for us, won't it?
I, of course, will sit and meditate with this old vine Chenin Blanc. But at the same time, I think for, and everyone listening, being able to drink this less than £9 a bottle Chardonnay, knowing that I am, voting with my money. Yes. Where have I spent my money? This hasn't cost me an arm and a leg. It's not a wine that I need to reserve to just my birthday or a big celebration. And here I am able to drink actually an absolutely beautifully balanced, gorgeous, vibrant Chardonnay where I'm supporting a community, drinking this ethical wine that has so many stories behind it. Yeah, it's, I guess that's why I love what I do. So thank you for sharing just actually a little bit. I invite everyone listening, go to the show notes. The link to the website of Bosman is there, so you can read a little bit more and investigate some of the other wines. And we can just feel better. You can drink a wine or you can drink a wine that has a bigger impact. So thank you. The short sentence I want to say is thank you.
Thank you, Janine. It's been really lovely to chat to you. I'm passionate about this farm and I'm passionate about what I do, and it's lovely to be able to share it with people.
Well, I feel it. So the next time I'm in South Africa,
please
I shall be coming to you.
Yes, please do. We'd love to have you.
Lovely. Well, I'll see you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye. I hope you enjoyed listening to Julia. She has certainly opened my eyes, not only to the incredible work that they're doing for their workers, but also to the fascinating world of vine nurseries. It's made me think. It's easy to forget just how much of a wine's future is shaped before a vine even goes in the ground. Which leads me to my wine quote of the episode, said by Jules Guillot, a 19th century French viticulturalist who, you may have guessed from the name, helped develop the Guillot trellising system, still very much used today. And he said, "He who knows how to graft knows how to give life a second time." There's something quite powerful in that idea about the care and attention it takes to give something or someone the chance to thrive again. And so that brings me beautifully to next week's guest, Amber Mina, Global Sales Director at Staglin Family Vineyard in Napa. Now, not only do they craft elegant organic Cabernets from the Rutherford bench, but the Staglin family also founded One Mind, a nonprofit dedicated to mental health research and awareness. So we're going to be talking about the power of purpose, connection, and how the wine world can support well-being on and beyond the vineyard. That's it from me this week. I hope the stories we've shared have sparked some fresh thinking and maybe even a deeper appreciation for what is in your glass. Now, if you have enjoyed the episode, do pass it on to your fellow wine lovers. Leave a quick review or give it a rating. It will help others discover these voices and vineyards. Until next Monday, wine friends, cheers to you.